I'm not a big believer in the paranormal things whatsoever, but what happened 3 days ago has honestly changed my mind permanently about spirits and non-living energies. I've just never felt such a fear in my entire life, and I've been in technically much more dangerous life-threatening scenarios, but what I felt that night had me and my girlfriend both absolutely paralyzed in fear. I think my headspace is getting a little better now, but we were both genuinely considering going to a psychiatrist for this, concerned that we almost got some form of PTSD. So, this is a little bit long and requires some backstory, but it's worth it. And for the sake of pacing, I'll refer to my girlfriend as A. So A's parents usually ask us to watch their house for them whenever they leave for a little getaway or to go camping with her younger brother and whatnot. But their house has always had this weird, uneasy undertone to it, and we've had a couple of other instances of more creepy things happening there, more than anywhere else I've ever been as well. An example of this being that a couple of months ago, we both stayed the night there in A's old bedroom while her parents were out of town, and it was about 1 a.m. and we both just woke up at the same time, randomly after falling asleep a couple of hours prior. Well, we looked at each other and said, "Did you just wake up for no reason too?" And then she said, "Yeah." And then, immediately right after I asked, the latch on the door handle clicked and fully closed. That made no sense because, well, there was no draft from anything in the room, and there was really no reason for it to do that. And then, at what felt like around 10 seconds after, we were just looking at each other, kind of dumbfounded. We just felt this weird presence, is the only way that I can really explain it, standing right outside of a bedroom door. Like, you know what it feels like when someone's just kind of watching you when you catch them? It was kind of like that. And me and her just kind of stare at each other. I was like, "Are you feeling this?" And she said, immediately, without hesitation, "Yeah, it feels like someone is just staring at us through the door crack." We just sat there in silence, waiting for anything else, and then it just sounded like shuffling outside of her bedroom door. The bedroom is connected to a hall with a staircase that leads downstairs, while to the right of the hallway outside of her room was an empty living area, and to the left was the washroom. But when we heard the shuffling, it didn't sound like it was one lone figure pacing back and forth through the hallway. It kind of sounded like the shuffling was a wave of people, all moving like a current from the washroom through the hall and to the living area. It was extremely creepy, and we stayed up trying to block it out, maybe telling ourselves that it was nothing. I mean, we were literally just discussing and thinking that it was anything else to convince ourselves that what we were hearing and feeling wasn't real. We eventually fell asleep that night, but after going through my most recent experience at that house, I know that what I felt that night wasn't my brain playing tricks on me. The most recent story goes like this. Her parents were leaving for a full 7-day week to take A's little brother camping, asked us to watch the house like normal. We both said yes, and each day was going pretty fine except for one, and that was the 5th day in. So we both had the day off that day. The day started off pretty normal until about 11 a.m, right after we had breakfast, when all of a sudden we just had a bit of a light disagreement, but for absolutely no valid reason I just blew everything way out of proportion. I'm genuinely a pretty laid-back guy. I very rarely get into disagreements, and when I do, I know how to let them go. And what I got upset about was genuinely not worth the reaction that I gave it. And I really don't know why I was acting like this. I mean, it was literally about us not having any Kleenex in the house, and A just said to use toilet paper. Like, obviously, not a problem, right? I don't know why too, but it was followed by the biggest psychotic break that I've ever had in my entire life. I was raging, screaming, sob-crying. There's a lot that I don't even really remember, and my girlfriend ended up reciting a lot of what I forgot when it was all finished. Apparently, there was a point that I was just pulling and ripping on my hair and staring at her saying, "This isn't me. I don't know why my brain is telling me to do this." There was a point it led upstairs too, where I was just standing at the top, and I vividly remember this, and I envisioned exactly how it would look if I were to jump off the top of the steps, careen off the side and break my neck. And all I could do was just continue having this internal battle with myself and my brain, like, why the hell would you do that? I kept telling myself not only the damage you'd be doing to yourself, but This shit isn't even your house. Shortly following this, A starts to clearly visibly worry and asks if she should phone 911 or my parents, which at this point, yeah, a completely reasonable thing to ask. And then I remember staring at her and just laughing, like actual psychotic laughter, and then shortly followed by just more crying. I then began crawling on a carpet at this point, grasping at the floor and at my chest. I straight up didn't know what the actual hell was going on. Like, I knew what I was doing was wrong, but there was something that felt like it literally overtook me, and I wasn't in charge of my own thoughts anymore. I remember for a split second that it felt like I was staring at the back of my own head while I was talking to A, telling her that this wasn't me, like I had a mini out-of-body experience or something. And let me remind you guys too that this is something that has never happened before or since. I'm usually very relaxed, and I seriously had no reason to be reacting the way that I did. I mean, I've had instances where I've been low, granted. I mean, who doesn't have that? But the sheer amount of unexplained rage was just not me. I felt like that day was just unmatched to any other instance in my life, and all over something just beyond trivial. This instance went on until I got off the carpet, and then I just felt somehow okay again. I cried and told A that I had zero control over my actions in that moment and that I was fighting them as hard as I could. Like I said too, I've never had any instance of this type of behavior in my life, and it all came just so suddenly that it just left us both shaken. I know that it sounds perhaps like a sudden case of a mental disorder, right? But this is where it gets spooky. So hours pass after this incident, and we both had a great rest of our day, felt totally fine for the rest of it, and then night came. It was about 11:27, I think. I remember checking the time when it happened. We were in A's old room, cozy, listening to quiet music playing off the laptop, and about to fall asleep when we heard two very sturdy knocks on her bedroom door. There's definitely nobody in the house, just us, and our eyes both shoot open at this. We look at each other, and we say, "You heard that right?" She says, "Holy shit, yes." We both just stare at the door. And I swear to you that the air just got heavy. I know that sounds weird, but there's no other way to explain it. There were no windows open, no draft, but the air just got really heavy, like you could feel how thick it was. And then we heard this sound come from right underneath her bedroom door. It kind of sounded like when you crack an empty water bottle, but more high-pitched. All I could envision was these three teeth like fingernails grinding and clicking together on the other side. The second I heard it, I knew what I heard was real too, because I looked at A immediately, followed by her eyes tearing up completely in shock. She looked at me and could barely speak. "Was that a crack?" I felt my face flush and my throat close up as soon as she said that. The anxiety in the room was just super high. I even looked at her and was like, "I know this sounds dumb and maybe I'm overreacting, but should we call the cops or something?" She looked at me with tears just streaming down her eyes, saying, "I literally thought about dialing 911 before you even mentioned it." And then, that's when the worst thing happened. Right after telling me that, we both feel it. We stared at the door, and behind it, it felt like something was just growing larger in size and just getting more and more massive and defined by the second. Whatever was on the other side, it felt like it could have easily killed us if it wanted to. It was weighing down the room, and it felt like a blanket of just negative energy was just smothering us. It was at this point too that I saw the most gruesome and grotesque, mind-crushing mental images just flash by my eyes that I've ever had in my life. Flashes of just killings and malice and evil things and unavoidable circumstances and just terrible things. I thought that I saw flesh and meat and bones at one point and just pure evil things. And it felt like it all just kind of flashed in my head in the snap of a finger. But the strange thing was, we both allegedly saw the same things because I told her what I was seeing and she said that she was seeing the same thing at the same time. I honestly didn't know what it meant to be frozen in fear until that night. Like, you always see it in every cliche movie where it's like, "Why aren't you moving? Holy shit, you have so many opportunities but you're not moving." But nah, I fully understand now what it's like. Paralyzation from fear is a very real thing. Anyway, after what felt like hours of just staring at this door, which was probably like 5 minutes, I forced all I had in myself to jolt up in front of the door, turn the light switch on, and went to go and comfort A. But as I'm trying to comfort both her and myself, she looks over my shoulder because my back was facing the door, and then she looks at me, and her face. I've seen a lot of expressions in my lifetime, and I've seen her make many, but that face that she made towards the door while I was looking at her was the stuff of nightmares. The definition of human fear, and what I saw was only for maybe a second and a half, but it's an image that will be burned into my mind forever. I wouldn't even be able to recreate it, I think, or show anything remotely comparable. Her face turned all the exact same shade of pink-red from her eyeballs to her lips to her nose. It was all the same shade of colour. Her hair looked really tight. Her mouth and eyebrows moved in such a way that I've never seen a person's face contort so much, and her cheekbones were extremely prominent. And then, just like that, her face went right back to a normal-looking person. But what I saw was something completely different. After about 25 minutes of all of this initially happening, we woke up the gall to leave the house eventually. Leaving the bedroom was the most mind-racking part, just waiting to see what was on the other side of the door. Somehow we both knew that when we would open the door that there would be nothing there, but it was definitely something before we opened it. Well, we opened the door anyway on the count of 3, and it felt like the second we did it, whatever was there on the other side just dispersed from the spot that it was standing. We sprinted to the front door of the house, went outside the front and called a cab. A was completely mentally checked out with leaving the house, and I've never seen someone in so much fear, and I've never been in so much myself. We were both shaking more than we ever had, and I've never felt such a relief when leaving that specific location. Like I said, it all happened 3 days ago, and the first 2 nights after were nothing but insomnia-soaked. I just had to tell somebody about this because, well, it's been eating away at both of us. And so we've had plenty talks about it since it happened, and it seems there's a bit more than I initially knew about. Because apparently, while I was having my out-of-nowhere freak-out and was ripping at my hair telling A that I didn't feel like myself, she told me that while I did this, my eyes just went like a mat. Even though I was crying and freaking out and should have been glistening, my eyes were matte dry. She told me that she didn't want to tell me in that moment as to freak me out more, which was reasonable. That wasn't me after all. But after seeing her face, it's just really uncanny that we both had a very similar experience. Also, it wasn't until we got back home to our house that she told me this as well. After I told her about the face that she made, she looked at me and was like, I saw something and I've been trying to convince myself that it wasn't real. There's no way it could be, right? So I was like, well, what was it? And she told me that she thought that she saw a hand underneath the door and it looked like a white glove. And I was like, a white glove? And then she said that it didn't have any wrinkles or skin or anything, it kind of looked like a cloud. It swiped underneath really quickly and then just grasped the door, and then you told me that I was scaring you. I looked at you for a split second, blinked, and it was gone. I know it all sounds a bit wacko, so I don't blame any of you if you choose not to believe me. I mean, I found it even hard to believe her at first, but the expression her face made didn't lie, and to be quite honest, I believe it. I mean, what I was feeling seconds prior and even throughout the whole ordeal won't ever escape my memories and kind of backs up what she's saying. Anyway, when we eventually left the house, it honestly felt like we were escaping a nightmare, only to wake up to remembering the nightmare was real anyways. Back in 2015, I studied abroad in Japan for a semester. I made some great friends during my program, some of which I still chat with to this day, in fact. Anyways, I was with my friend Rick in the heart of the Tokyo subway station. He and I are both quite proficient in Japanese, so we were able to find our way around fairly easily. At the time this happened, we were looking at a map and trying to figure out the best route to our next destination. And apparently, we looked lost. Rick was pointing on the map when suddenly, two middle-aged women politely interrupted us. Our following conversation was all in Japanese, but I'm obviously going to put it in English here. So, the first woman said, "Hello, you look lost. Do you need help?" Rick replied that no, in fact we were okay. We were just trying to get to a location that, for the life of me, I can't remember anymore. We then showed her our planned route, and she replied by saying that we shouldn't take that route. It isn't the best way. Interested in saving time and money, Rick and I inquired about the better route. And this is where it started to get a bit weird. So the woman pointed to a location where we would get off. I thought it was strange because all the stops on the map were marked with a dot. There was clearly no dot where she was pointing, which meant that that stop didn't exist. I gave Rick a look and his face showed me that he understood. Well, while we were trying to figure this out, the woman suddenly says, "Would you like to make some Japanese memories? We can take you there." I thought the phrase was odd, but they were probably going to recommend a tourist site or something. She pointed at a place on the map that did indeed have a stop, but was over an hour away and pretty much in the middle of nowhere. We said that we were all set and just wanted to get to our destination, and that's when she said, "Oh, come to the shrine, make Japanese memories, come worship Jesus. It would be such a shame to waste this time." I thought to myself, shrine in the middle of nowhere and Jesus? This doesn't sound good, and we indicated with regret that we couldn't, and we began to just kind of walk away. As we started quickly in the opposite direction, they called after us louder and louder, saying, "What a waste. You should come worship Jesus at the shrine. Take pictures. It's such a shame, such a waste." When I returned home to my host mother, I told her about it, and I said that I thought that they were a part of the Japanese New Religions groups, which are a fringe religion that have formed in recent times that are usually conglomerations of other religions and usually resemble cults. And she gravely agreed with me. To this day, I have no idea what would have happened had we have gone. Not that I think logically we would have ever made this decision, but perhaps they were trying to just recruit us to their religion. I mean, hell, maybe they really did just want to take pictures. Doubtful, though. Or perhaps there was something more sinister at work. I'll never know because I haven't the slightest idea what new religion they were a part of, but I just can't think of anything good happening at a shrine in the middle of nowhere with two foreigners who were lured out there. I was about 26 years old when this event happened, and it was about 4 years ago. So a friend and I decided to go on a 2-week road trip from Kansas through Colorado, Utah, and all the way down to the West Coast. We camped the whole way, and honestly, we just had an incredible time. Other than occasionally having trouble finding campsites, that is, but one day, after a fun and gluttonous night in Portland, we decided to camp on Mount Hood. It was the middle of summer, so we expected to see other campers on the mountain, even though it was a weekday. We had to drive pretty far up the mountain in search of a campsite because all the ones towards the bottom were closed, due to fallen trees or trees that would be falling if a strong breeze came through and whatnot. We were excited to be there, though, and we saw a couple of old men fishing on the way up and one family camping there. They appeared to be Native American, and there were about 5 of them. I don't think these details matter, but I'm just describing it as good a detail as I can remember, so you guys get the gist of everything. But we drive up quite a ways more before we find a nice private camp spot and set up camp for the night. But we walk around, gathering wood, talking about the night in Portland and setting up the tent and whatnot. The time comes for us to go to bed, and my friend Lucy falls asleep. I'm just laying there trying to fall asleep when I hear footsteps and leaves crunching. This obviously puts me on high alert since there weren't many people camping and none close by. I lay there with my heart racing and I listen. I begin to hear voices and I try to nudge my friend awake, but she was pretty out and not really waking. I continue to listen and I start to make out the voices and the words. And this is the strange part because it was our voices, having the exact same conversation that we were just having around the campfire, not even an hour before. It didn't last long, though, before silence just returned. Needless to say, I had a very hard time sleeping that night. And I'm wondering if you guys have any ideas as to what this is. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.